All right, welcome to America This Week Live, ATW Live. I'm Matt Taibbi.
I'm Walter Kern.
And we haven't seen y'all since before Thanksgiving. Did you have a good holiday, Walter?
I had a minimal Thanksgiving. It was very secular and without turkey. I had a screenplay due. I'm finishing it as we speak, actually writing it with my other hand that you can't see. And in order to finish it in time, I may have to break off at some point and do that. But and so my kids were here, my grown kids. It's always strange when you have grown kids visit you when they don't live in state, because you think this may be the last time I ever see them for Thanksgiving.
Jesus, that's depressing.
Well, yes, it is actually.
Yeah.
But at my age, lasts are something you think about all the time. This may be the last custom suit I ever have, made for myself, or the first.
This may be the last time I order pants in this size.
Yeah, exactly. No, when you buy things at Costco, you think, okay, well, I'm going to die before I get through this box of latex gloves. And and I actually know that to be true, having cleaned out my father's house, because I see things that he bought, with great optimism in 1998. He died in 2020, So you never know when you're buying the last jumbo pack of, I don't know, paper towels. But
maybe one should just randomly buy things just to break up that expectation. Like, I'll just go out and get myself a set of golf clubs tomorrow. I already have one, but just to make sure that it's not the last set of golf clubs that I'm ever going to buy.
Dude, if you're buying golf clubs and you're over 55, you're buying them for your kids.
Okay. I actually did that, but anyway, go. Yeah.
So anyway, on that incredibly mordant and depressing note, I did have a nice Thanksgiving, but it was sort of plug and play and not long and without family fights or no discussions of politics.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we didn't have any either, so that was good.
Yeah.
And had a great Thanksgiving, all things considered. It's an excellent holiday, and we return to a high drama political situation. Two big stories.
It's actually the end of a lot of drama in some ways, and guarantees that there will be no more on certain subjects. This pardon,
possibly, yes, possibly, right? I mean,
Hunter Biden, the prison years isn't going to happen.
Yes, not for a while, right? So, all right. I guess we have to get to the specifics of this. So Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter today, and we're going to get into there's a comic aspect to this because, okay, Walter, what's the easiest hit there is on the internet in the social media age?
Hypocrisy,
right? So, and this is like, the Big Mac of what's the gigantic oversized fast food item, like the Fuddruckers 1 pound burger or whatever it is, of hypocrisy. Like, you can't make a hypocrisy sandwich bigger than this one, and we'll show you some tape of it. There's some amusing stuff that's circulating online on this, and it's kind of like an Everest of people backtracking on statements, and there's some additional comic value in things that were said today because people are, sort of in real time coming up with new mental justifications for things that they said in the exact opposite way not that long ago. But there's also the question of is how corrupt is this really? President are presidents allowed to do this? They are by law. I'm kind of of two minds about this, so I'm curious to hear what your take is. This was an unusual pardon, apparently, right? Because
it was what I call a grab bag, all you can eat, wrap around, surprise party pardon, because it covers all crimes, known and unknown, past a certain date, which is about 11 years ago. So if we find out tomorrow that Hunter slaughtered a child in Central Park, doesn't matter. He cannot be brought up on charges for anything for a long period of time, and that it's been sold as some response to some particular convictions recently, or a particular cases, a tax fraud case and this gun charge, is ridiculous, since they don't include this most of this period.
Right. So that does make it different. Well, okay, let's back up for a second. Going back through all the entire history of presidential pardons, or at least the ones that I know about, I expect presidents to do things with their presidential pardon power that are craven, off-putting, offend my sensibilities, sort of thwart my desire for justice, all those things. Like, that's kind of what the point of the pardon. I almost expect them to do that, in addition to occasionally pardoning someone for good reasons, which does happen. It's more like things like the Christmas Eve pardon of the Iran-Contra defendants, or especially the Mark Rich pardon, which I thought was the worst one of my lifetime. But what makes this one different, Walter, or is this one different for you?
What makes this one different is that we have this Hunter Biden laptop, which exposed scads of crimes, scads of potential prosecutions. Now, he's waited out the term limits on a lot of these crimes. Tax fraud can only be prosecuted 6 years in the past, various others. Some crimes, of course, have no statute of limitations. But interestingly, this pardon begins January 1st, 2014, right before Hunter Biden gets a position on the board of Burisma, the Ukrainian national gas company. He also is exempt from a long statute of limitations on sex trafficking, which has a longer term of vulnerability. But based just on his laptop, which of course we started the Biden reign by being lied to about by 51 intelligence agents, it makes a nice bookend to that. So he was declared not guilty of something that was manifestly a record of his misbehavior, and now he's been declared formally not guilty for anything that might be exposed not only by that but other means. But
it doesn't cover future offenses, right?
No, I mean, he and knowing Hunter, he won't be able to restrain himself, probably. I mean,
can we see that somebody did a tweet about that? That's quite funny. Can we see the funny tweet? This is Hunter Biden tonight. Somebody tweeted out, he's gonna be making some dialing some old phone numbers tonight, I expect. Okay, I guess that was.
You see, there would be less sympathy, and I think all sympathy for this guy is misplaced. That's my position. To be honest with you, I knew about Hunter Biden and actually a lot of the specific crimes, like the diamond payoff and others, many years ago through a mutual friend who's a magazine editor. I knew about them in detail, and so did everybody else, because I'm no super ace underground reporter. But he would be better off had on the laptop he'd be seen in wearing suits and ties talking on the phone. But because he was seen with, firearms and cigarettes hanging out of his mouth and his dick hanging down, it makes it look like, these are the crimes of, some scumbag porn star in Boogie Nights or something. When in fact, the essence of what he did was good old white collar crime, selling family influence internationally, getting calls at the White House, telling him that my dad will be on the line in a second. And this was a very self-serving pardon for Joe, because a lot of those trials, or potential prosecutions could have led back to him. And I'll add this. It is my understanding from a very good source, and this conversation took place years ago, that the Biden family criminality hardly ends with Joe and Hunter, and that it is on a scale that is almost systematic,
right? Like
systematic, yes, and could involve, a kind of level of fraud that we haven't even touched the surface of, frankly, here in the United States. So I would imagine that there are other Bidens who will be pardoned before this term is up. This, what some people call the Biden crime family, what Giuliani calls the Biden crime family, is, I believe, a pinnacle of presidential corruption, which has now gotten off scot-free. And Biden himself has a superpower. He's able to lie self-righteously. He in other words, he's always got a high moral, sort of Hallmark card, emotional, it's my family, hey man, you do it for your son, brushback for anyone who confronts him with the evidence of his total, systematic, craven deception. And not only did he deceive people about the likelihood of this pardon, he got others to deceive people for it who didn't have to do it, in the press, all over the place. The fulsome testimonials to Joe Biden's character, integrity, fatherhood, and so on that have gone on for years are all unnecessary and were provided free of charge, we think, by people who should be guarding their reputation, or at least that of their cable news channel or their newspaper, but threw it all down for him.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons, like, I really admire the reporter Ben Schreckinger of Politico. He works in a paper that was obviously very sympathetic to Biden throughout his entire presidency, but he chased down the emails in the laptop. He was really the first kind of non conservative reporter who confirmed the details in the laptop and made it possible for people in the mainstream media to say that the laptop had been confirmed, that the material in it was legitimate. He did things like file freedom of information requests with, I believe it was the Swedish embassy, because Hunter Biden was living at a residence, I think, that had some kind of connection to one of the Scandinavian countries in Washington. He really did his homework in this, and then he wrote a book that basically said the same thing that you just said. After doing all this work, he wrote a book called The Bidens Inside the First Family's 50-Year Rise to Power, that talks about all the other family members and about all the different kind of wings of the family business and the different roles that they might have in the family operation. Because the scuttlebutt on Biden within sort of the Hill always was that he's a slimy character, but there's not a lot in terms of money with him. Like, if you look, you won't find a Nancy Pelosi sized fortune in his name. But you have to look not in his name. That's the whole point. And so there is a lot out there, and I totally sympathize with the frustration that some people are going to feel, because there is a story here that's probably not going to be investigated to the fullest because of this. I assume that you can continue to
many stories. They involve Ukraine. They involve China. They involve the mayor's, the Moscow mayor's wife. They involve, I believe, Romania. The information that I was alluding to earlier, which was given to me by a high state legal official in a big state, involves fraud, basically, at a tens and tens of millions of dollars level. It wasn't suggested that Biden that Hunter was involved, but others. I think they look like South American dictators to me. Warren Buffett too lives in a modest house, supposedly,
Right.
just right there in Omaha. The one he bought 1957 for him and his wife. Yeah, a sort of that's a mafia tactic. It really is, to keep a normal household, and live in a regular neighborhood, drive just a decent car, but not a nice one.
Yeah, and look, you and I once on a show, I think it was maybe earlier this year or maybe the end of last year, we went through all the shell companies. Remember that? We spent a time going through that list that they produced in the the two whistleblowers produced in, I guess it was congressional disclosure, and it was mind blowing how many different organizations there were tied to Hunter Biden. And if you're just looking at it and you didn't know the name of this person, but you knew that it was a relative of a famous politician, you would say this is a bagman operation. These are mail drops for money that is going to buy influence. Like, you would automatically make that determination.
Remember when it was just a rumor that people had called in, or that Hunter had called in to meetings of some of these companies and then put his father online.
Right.
And remember when it turned out to be true and everyone thought, oh, they've got him now, or this is terrible. These people have lowered the bar to the point that there's no bar. And they also, if you have to think about it for more than 5 seconds, all have blackmail on each other. I mean, any kind of organization like this or group like this, which has knowledge of each other's crimes, can blackmail the other. Now, it's unlikely that Joe would have any reason to blackmail his son, but Hunter has, a few decades ahead of him.
And then think about other people like Devin Archer. I mean, Devin Archer ended up testifying, but there's lots of people in, they work in these companies like Rosemont Seneca. There are lawyers, there are, notaries. I mean, God knows who else who have something that they can use. It sort of seemed in some of the interactions with Petro Poroshenko that that there was an edge to those conversations too, that that couldn't be fully accounted by geopolitics. I didn't think accounted for by geopolitics, but we'll probably never know at this point, or if we do, it'll be the result of some labyrinthine organization. And I do feel, especially, there are people who kind of risk their careers to come forward from the IRS and from the FBI to move this story forward, and now where are they, right? So that's tough too.
The FBI, which was in possession of this laptop, long before the public knew of its existence. I would say that the vilification of Donald Trump, the creation of this ultra monster, so that by comparison to what's suspected of him or feared from him, anything looks slight, was one of the most brilliant moves by a corrupt system that's ever been tried. Because immediately this happens, this pardon is announced, and people say, well, Trump, was going to destroy this family the minute he gets in. This is self-defense. They're, mounting a preliminary defense against a dictatorial crackdown. I mean, there's nothing that they can't blame on him. I mean,
we already got that. So Ezra Klein today, this is his quote: "It's terrible politics and precedent, but I'm going to be honest and say that the Trump team has been brutally clear that they want revenge in their enemies. They are obsessed with Hunter in particular, and they would weigh like hell on me if I were his father and I could protect him."
One person's revenge is another person's justice, and vice versa. The party of evening the score for whole races, genders, and other groups, as well as individuals, finds revenge good word for anything aimed at it, and its leadership. And Klein doesn't owe Joe Biden a damn thing.
Yeah.
It's terrible politics. So he admits in his first sentence that he's about to, compromise his values. But the asterisk is bigger than the statement in this case. The asterisk being, Trump's vengeful. Well,
right.
I mean, who gives a damn? Vengeance is not an issue. Guilt is. If someone isn't guilty, then they're not. Trials happen, and we have jurisprudence and due process and so on. And how many prosecutions are motivated by vengeance? I'd say maybe 60% in some way at certain levels. I mean, they have to choose according to some basis. It's often that you made an enemy of them. So that's just bullshit from Ezra Klein. Why is this guy still prostituting himself to someone who can do nothing for him?
Yeah, I know. You're right.
They're going down with the ship. I'm shocked at the level with which they are willing to countenance World War III, revving up Syria, a blanket pardon. Wasn't the line a month ago that Donald Trump will have, because of the Supreme Court, unlimited powers? Well, this is the most unlimited power I've seen exercised for a while, because it just blanks out a period of a person's life in terms of criminality in advance.
Yeah, that's certainly a twist. I mean, normally you're offended by somebody who's already committed a crime and or is a fugitive from justice, at least, and being let off the hook. This being given a get out of jail free card for things not yet charged is unique. But I'm going to say something unpopular about this, and we may even argue, but I think we should get to the funny stuff out of the way first, because this is an extraordinary angle all on its own. We can't play this whole clip of people talking about how this will never happen because it's too long. Like, we can't even play a fraction of it. There are several of these supercuts floating around of people talking about how Joe Biden has promised, he has insisted he will never pardon his son. And it's really kind of extraordinary.
It is. But to me, it's so worth it, because I urge the audience to focus on the acting. These people obviously had no knowledge of what they're talking about, right? All they had was Biden making a few, ringing statements about what he would never do. But all these testimonials to his ethics and his soulfulness and so on are something that they've pulled out of their thespian minds, and they've attached emotions to them. I
didn't know you were going for minds. I thought.
Yeah. They've attached emotion to them, and they, hand gestures. So look at the depths to which they sort of put meat on the bones of shit they're making up.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. Let's roll this if we can.
The presidential promise to put the law before a family.
I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Letting the world know that he will not wipe away the decision of 12 of his son's peers.
Was asked directly, and he has said he wouldn't pardon his son if he gets convicted.
Let's wait and see what happens if he loses.
Yeah, but he said it.
He's going to get pardoned by his dad. There's no question about that.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
Major commitment from the president, accepting the outcome of the trial and also pledging not to pardon his son.
So the challenge for him is really to continue to live up to his values when it was really personal, and he did that today.
It seems like a pretty normal, straightforward answer, but it takes new weight when we see what Trump is saying about the outcome of his trial, what we're hearing from other Republicans who say they don't accept the jury's verdict here in New York.
The contrast is profound. To sit there and say, well, I'm not going to intervene in the legal process, and I wouldn't pardon my son. One side, Democrats and Joe Biden protecting the justice system. And on the other, Republicans and Trump protecting Trump.
Our current president of the United States
Look at the folded arms.
has so much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son.
Folded arms.
I mean, you know, again,
he makes you,
it's all about the contrast.
President Biden saying, I will respect whatever this jury decides versus Donald Trump after he was convicted on 34 counts, saying the entire system is rigged against him.
Their latest attack has been that Joe Biden has politicized and weaponized the DOJ, right? That was the whole argument around Donald Trump's conviction. And this week, of course, Hunter Biden was found guilty, and Joe Biden has very clearly said he would not pardon his son, he would not commute his sentence. How stark is this difference? I mean, how can Republicans keep making this argument now that Joe Biden has really put it out there? Where's Hunter? And he stood there in a courtroom, flanked by his family, and he's accepted his sentence.
He's not pardoning his son,
Andrew Weissman,
which he could do. These are federal charges.
Right.
He is not doing that. He is not doing it because he is living what it means to have a rule of law in this country. And it is in, I mean, if you want to know if he believes it, you could actually see what is happening with his own son.
The president, Anderson, has been really clear that he is going to accept the outcome of the trial no matter what happens.
So Joe Biden's gotten asked about, talking about law and order. He's gotten asked if he would pardon his son. He has said no. On the other side, you've got Donald Trump. Who has said that he will pardon the January 6th insurrectionists. No. They're not even his sons. They're just sons of bitches.
Washington said, I am not running again because he understood the self-restraint was absolutely essential to this country. So you don't have a king. He did not pardon his son. He did not order the Department of Justice to say, don't prosecute my son. So impressive.
Could have ordered the Justice Department to halt the prosecution of Hunter Biden, according to this court. Everyone understands he's a decent man.
I think Joe Biden has a chance here to stand up for the rule of law, to say the law is the law, no matter who it is, no matter if it's Trump or Biden. And remember, part of Trumpism's dangerousness is that it tears down institutions, important institutions of our democracy. So there's an opportunity here for Biden to say, the jury found him guilty. This is how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. I don't know, should we
period, paragraph. End of
story. Hilarious, though.
Dude, look at these freaks that we've gotten used to. Remember when they told us that Biden was second only to George Washington in his respect for America by stepping down to give Harris the chance to lead? Matt,
I forgot about that.
It's one thing not to investigate a story. It's another thing to accept the statements, the self-interested statements of politicians and not question them. It's another thing to serve as their disciples, to sit around like the 12 did after Jesus was crucified and say, oh my God, did you see when he rose? I felt when the tomb was empty. And then when he shined and was transfigured. This is practically what they're doing. They have an almost religious intensity about the integrity of the scumbag. And their companies are all for it. They add all these acting chops to the thing. I mean, I'm surprised no one cried over Biden's self-sacrifice and letting his son be, persecuted. But for America, he refused to intervene. We can't go on like this. We cannot live in this world anymore. It is destroyed us. And every one of those people goes on a most wanted poster that's on my wall behind this computer. None of them. They get a big X, like they were, Iraqi war criminals or something.
No, I'm with you. I mean, and
Matt, there's no journalism after that. Really,
that's what I was saying. I was actually going to say that in their defense, like the acting is there because what else? There's no other value add. They're not reporting anything. Right, so why are they're on TV to act and sell? That's all they're doing, But
why?
Why?
Did they get money? Did they get money from the deal? Why, really? I mean, this is to be affirmatively, effusively, almost tearfully supportive of the integrity of someone who the record has shown already for a long time is, at worst, a hack political figure, whatever else he does, and at most, one of the most assiduous liars and scumbags who calls up, Ukrainian people and says, hey, that $1 billion ain't coming. I mean, they prosecuted Trump for looking into this shit.
I know.
They impeached him for
it. Yeah, exactly. And when that story broke, when they impeached him, I was still at Rolling Stone when that happened. And, they kind of, they sicked me on that story. And I remember calling up people in Ukraine. I didn't talk to Shokin himself, but I talked to one of his deputies, and you can't tell over the phone. But they didn't sound totally unconvincing to me when they said no. We were looking at the company, and we got called off, and there were cases that were still in motion. One of my old colleagues, Yulia Latinina, who's still over there in Moscow, she did a story about this, how there was still an open case involving Burisma when the Biden campaign was insisting there was not. So I think even that whole situation is still very much, at least ambiguous, that Biden may have been, using $1 billion in US aid to try to pressure people away from an investigation of his son's company. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. Like it's not excluded at all. And
well, you ask where the money goes, and I have a pretty good, sadly, sense of the rates that hookers and cocaine dealers charge. Extensive underground reporting earlier in my life has revealed that it takes a lot to spend the money that he supposedly blew through. I mean, it has to be like you have to be going 5,000, 10,000 a night every freaking night, and have a few $100,000 nights somewhere in there too. Just that they have nothing to show for their graft is not a defense. But Hunter has no visible reason to have not, spent all that Burisma money. I mean, he was getting paid in a month what Walter Kern could live on an island flying hookers in for. And and
that's just one of the no-show jobs we know about, basically, right?
Right.
I mean, how many of those are there? Remember, this is a guy who remember that letter from was it Tom Carper to Amtrak recommending Hunter for some kind of position or a seat on the board or something like that, saying that his qualification is that he rides Amtrak trains a lot. I mean, how many of those arrangements are out there? We have no idea, right?
But one of the reasons that this happened, and one of the reasons that these people sang the praises of Joe and wrote lyric odes to his integrity, is that it protects a way of life. It protects a way of life that is not specific to the Bidens. There were a lot of other children of the powerful who got in on the Ukraine grift and even the Burisma grift and
others, but yes, definitely
and others. And you look at all this and you go, what does it add up to? What is a corrupt press, a corrupt family at the pinnacle of power? Remember, he was vice president for 8 years. What does that all add up to? Maybe World War III. Who knows?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, you have to take that into consideration.
Exactly. There is the situation we're in now geopolitically with the people we're in it with might not exist if any of these people not only had done their jobs, but had done anything less than become cheerleaders and sickening propagandists. We are in a situation now where we have a guy with almost nothing to lose who's just showed that, the legacy that supposedly binds presidents to honorable behavior at the end of their terms doesn't mean jack to him.
Yeah. And we also can maybe pin Russiagate at the feet of this thing too, right? I mean, at least it's possible.
I mean, when you have this much downside and somebody comes in from the outside, with Rudy Giuliani, Rico, prosecutor extraordinaire, and other people, or in the case of now, is about to come in with, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, whoever heads, I forget who the DOJ, the attorney, Pam Bondi, all right, you get pretty damn scared. You start acting proactively. And back when Russiagate started, can you believe the number of people who probably went, this can't happen. We know what we've been doing. They know what we've been doing. Best defense is good offense, and they went on it. They endangered our relationship with the world's other greatest nuclear power, perhaps to cover their own chronic, deep malfeasance. When things get too corrupt, you've got people in a position with nothing to lose who are used to lying, used to self-justification. The web of culpability is very wide. It usually extends into institutions because the criminal actors depended in a way on laxity or maybe outright corruption of those who are supposed to police or restrain them. So, as I said before, a conspiracy that is small is not the kind to worry about. It's the ones that spread their wings so widely that all kinds of people and institutions have an investment in keeping them covered up and making sure they succeed. So what we're just seeing the sort of poison nugget at the center of the immense candy bar that is Washington corruption.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all the different things that the Hunter Biden situation impacted. It's kind of incredible. I mean, in the Twitter files, remember it wasn't me, it was Schellenberger who found the invitations and the reports from the Aspen Institute's Hack and Leak Roundtable in June of 2020, when they had all these luminaries of national security reporting, everyone from Ellen Nakashima to, let's see, who else was there? Noah Shachtman, David Sanger, Vivian Schiller, who was the director of the Aspen Institute. They had NPR was there, CNN, NBC, and they all got together to plan how to non-cover a story that the rest of the world didn't know was even coming, for 3 months. And they successfully sat on this thing for a while, and then that turned into a major censorship story, right? Like it's possible we wouldn't even have known about the aspects of the digital censorship realm had they not blocked that stupid story from appearing on Facebook and Twitter. Not the government, but the platforms. I mean, as far as we know, anyway.
But but post-mortem analysis has showed, had they not blocked it, they might have lost the presidency. And the presidency is what's given them the ability to cover their tracks. And, I find myself absolutely staggered by the level of scrutiny we're supposed to give Trump's cabinet picks, but the level of just sort of laxity we're supposed to regard the ruling family of the ruling party of America.
Yeah, and you mentioned before about the kind of quasi-religious zeal that you detected in the voices of the folks in that supercut. The best example of that might have been the reaction from Whoopi Goldberg today. Did you see this yet, Walter?
Not yet, but
okay, we got to watch this because this
said the magic words, Whoopi.
I know we're not going to be doing this sort of gloating at the sort of ex-relevant media much, but this is kind of an exception. This is funny.
We can wave goodbye as they sail off.
Yeah.
I respect it as a parent. I understand why he would do it, but I wonder to understand why lie about it for so long.
I'd stop calling it a lie.
Okay, why repeatedly say you're not going to and you do? And secondarily, for the part of this country, half of it that doesn't support Biden, doesn't know him personally, doesn't get to have phone calls, and they're just looking at a system that seems like it's only benefits the people who are in power.
I'm going to say,
what precedent does that set?
Well, here's what it says. It's a precedent for all of us to open our eyes because we've elected someone who is in a similar situation, who didn't have a drug problem, who knew what he was doing, who clearly stood and said, I can do this. And he did it. So I think.
What's he talking about, Trump?
Yeah.
For many, many reasons, this is very different than any other situation that we have ever dealt with. Because when we're talking about who gets a pardon and who doesn't get a pardon, this man, I think Biden had no intentions of pardoning Hunter.
He did it by
And
accident?
I think the more stuff that went down, I think he said, well, why am I busting my behind to stay straight? And do
What the fuck?
When nobody else is, when no one else is doing.
I just thought he was going to win.
So
He said he wasn't going to pardon him even after he lost.
That's it. Yeah.
So Trump made him pardon.
You made me do it. Yeah. There's a lot of that out there, but that was the most craven of.
You sit back and you watch Trump and you go, why am I fucking not killing people in the street? Look at him.
Right.
You know, why do I live an honest life? I need to go do this and do that. I got to live a little. Look at Trump. He got elected and he does shit that's, not specified, and that he's had 4 fucking trials for under Biden. Trump, the reason that this stinks so much more than I can stand is that I probably had to watch 1,000 Biden speeches or press conferences in which he talked about the rule of law and distanced himself from these Trump prosecutions, said they weren't political, even though they were absolutely unprecedented in our history for an election year and and a former president.
Yeah, no.
I mean, there's only so much you can take. I've taken so much, and the fact is, we haven't yet paid the price for it, and that's what scares me. Like, you don't get away with this personally without lying awake at night, going, God's coming, Well,
or do you?
We're not going to get away with this.
Yeah, but wait, what do you mean? Why aren't we going to get away with this?
Well, first of all, a lot of this corruption involves
I see.
The country involved in a proxy war that could lead to World War III. A lot of this corruption involves China. A lot of this corruption involves how can I put this? The intelligence agencies, which were willing to send people out en masse to cover it. A lot of this corruption has extended to the media, in which it voluntarily became a kind of emotional co-conspirator. By
the way, can we bring up what I think is still the most underreported story of the 2020 cycle, which is that the FBI briefed the Senate on the Hunter Biden story and told them that it was Russian disinformation before it was leaked. So they briefed people like Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley.
So it goes beyond the 51
exactly
people.
Exactly. It goes to the actively serving FBI lying to sitting members of the Senate, which I think is far worse than, for instance, the FBI briefing Facebook or Twitter and letting them make their own decision. Like when you start bringing in real law enforcement and they lie to members of Congress about something like this.
If you contradict yourself in 2 interviews with the FBI, neither of which will be taped because they don't do it that way. They take notes afterwards. If you contradict yourself, you open yourself, and many have suffered for this, to prosecution for lying to them. They can go up there institutionally representing them, the FBI, and brief Congress people and lie to them. like I say, I suddenly feel like I'm somebody who woke up in the middle of a druggy night and realized he's in a bath full of blood, and I sat up and go,
yeah, you're in your boxers, you're wearing somebody else's shirt. There's like, and we've all been there. Or maybe we haven't, but no, I understand what you're saying. This is like waking up from a nightmare, and
waking up from a nightmare that you didn't really realize was a nightmare until it suddenly dawns on you that none of this should have been happening, and that you're further in, and there's no way out. There's almost no way out for us, Matt, because the fact is, a lot of the apprehension about Trump is the apprehension of corrupt people who think they might have to fear the Reaper.
Right. And I think the other big story that broke over the weekend, which is about the FBI, I think there's a huge element of that in that one too. But just to return quickly to the Whoopi clip, the thing you mentioned, lying awake at night. I'm not sure there are going to be a lot of people lying awake at night, because what I took from that, and from a lot of these different editorials that I saw today, is that you saw how effortlessly she builds the mental construct that this makes sense to her.
Whoopi?
Yeah. Whoopi.
It didn't look effortless to me. I saw her struggling. She was really winging it. I didn't realize.
Oh no, I mean not the building the logical reasoning part of it, but the emotional acceptance of it. It was instantaneous, right?
Because she already has the emotions. They can't change. She just needs to find the words to express them.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so I'm not sure that there's going to be a whole lot of, worrying. Yes, there will be some people who, in a self-interested way, will fear the possible consequences that will come their way, because they would do it to the other side if they were in that position. But I think, for a lot of these sort of rank and file believers, it's just another thing that happened that you're not going to be able to talk them out of. So
Matt, on TV today, you can watch Patrick McCabe, of Russiagate fame.
Oh, I mean Andrew McCabe.
Andrew McCabe, excuse me. Weighing in on who should be the next head of the FBI in an ultimate way. You can watch all sorts of people who are transparently afraid. And whether they're sleeping at night, I don't know. Maybe they have a secret weapon that makes them, confident. I read a Jonathan Turley essay today in which he said that at the time, Hunter Biden's behavior toward, his looming prosecutions, and the time he didn't show up in Congress and so on, and sort of said, F you, were the behavior of somebody who knew that he had a past in his pocket that he could pull out at any time. And I think the biggest lie about this whole pardon has been that they just came up with it. It was just something that, a father got worried at Thanksgiving weekend and decided to pardon his son.
Yeah, there was actually an official statement about this. We can look at the Corinne Jean-Pierre tweet. She responded to Ashley Feinberg. Was it Ashley? No, it wasn't Ashley Feinberg. It was Andre Fahlberg. I'm sorry, I misread that. But if we can blow that up, you'll see that basically the initial report is Biden discussed pardoning his son with some of his closest aides since at least Hunter's conviction in June, according to NBC. Key line: it was decided at the time that he would publicly say he would not pardon his son, even though doing so remained on the table. So this is NBC sort of, I don't know, maybe backsliding into reporting by mistake.
I've seen this too many times. I know what exactly it is. It's the creation of a fallback position. You say, well, maybe it was June. The fact was it was June 2021. Okay. They did this with Biden's dementia. You started getting stories when he quit that back in February, aides were growing concerned about his increasing forgetfulness.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
That's because they noticed his fucking forgetfulness in 2018. But if they backdate it a little, and then they can fall back and say they've made a concession. Oh, you caught us. It was back in February that we noticed Joe was losing it. No, it wasn't. You systematically, knowledgeably, determinedly covered up his condition from the beginning.
Yeah. But regardless, they're doing that, and you can see that the current White House is still putting on press releases saying, no, that's false. We just came up with that. And
Matt, I've done all this. Okay. I did all this as a kid. I remember when my dad found a bag of marijuana in my car back when that was a big deal in the 70s. And I come home from my job and there's the bag of marijuana lying like a dead baby in the middle of the living room. And my parents are seated in their judgmental chairs. And do you know anything about this? And they said, how many times have you smoked marijuana? And I said, just 5. And they said, really? Okay, 10.
Right.
Dude, I've been smoking dope since I got, to this high school.
Right. Exactly. This is what I would call the Shaggy "It Wasn't Me" defense. Have you ever heard that song? But yeah, no, they're just remember that old Lenny Bruce routine, like even if she catches you in the act, deny it, right? That whole thing. It's this is the oldest political response in the book, and to their credit, they're at least consistent about that. So
okay, so I have a deal for Hunter Biden. Mm-hmm. This is a personal deal, but I speak as a representative of the somewhat decent citizens of America, the admittedly imperfect ones who may have crossed paths with Hunter Biden types at some point. You need to write a tell-all memoir. You're now scot-free, dude. You're scot-free. You
need the money.
You have no downside. So starting in January 1st, 2010, I want the full Hunter Biden after midnight, beyond, breakfast in Russia, China, and other story. It would be the greatest tell-all book
totally
in American history. And he has nothing to fear from writing it.
And he should take the advance and blow it on like the mother of all Leaving Las Vegas binges. When
Matt, if I was a publisher and I could get him to sort of legally commit to a contract which required candor, I would give him $20 million. I'd give him what both Obamas got together. This thing, would be like the Bible of degeneracy. It will live on
dreams of my father.
Live on for centuries.
It would be a fantastic. I am offering publicly to ghostwrite that book. Hunter,
and as somebody said here, yeah, and he'd go out and find some way to like have 70 hookers a night and blow the $40 million advance, and he'd never write a word. That's the only problem.
Right, it would look like those post-concert scenes in Straight Outta Compton. Just like you've never seen that many naked women in one hotel room. That's what it would look like. According to NewsGuard, that's misinformation.
Matt, you've been fooling with AI lately. You were foolish enough to admit it on Twitter. Here's my proposition. Dear Grok, write a memoir in the first person using obscenity and graphic sexual language and naming names based on the Hunter Biden scandals that we know of and imagining others which seem credible. Dude, that would spit out a book that would probably be worth the $20 million.
That would be really, really funny. Yeah. And write it in the style of Tom Wolfe or something like that would be really fun. Or no, Norman Mailer. It would have to be Mailer, right? I think that would be
Bret Easton Ellis.
Easton Ellis.
Yeah. That cold, amoral, it would be called Far Less Than Zero. Far less.
Right. He'd be a great choice to ghostwrite it too. I actually probably better than me. So he's out there. He may even listen to the show. I'm not sure. But yeah. Okay.
He's
So
a friend of mine.
Is he? Yeah. First of all, I reread that American Psycho recently, and I can't love that book enough. I just think it's great. So before we move on to the next thing, I got to get this off my chest. I think that presidents are allowed to do this. I mean, they have this power. They're elected, and when they're elected, voters are telling them that we are empowering you to do this kind of shit. And it's just one of these things we have to put up with as voters. I've been arguing for years that the Hunter Biden story, at first I thought it was more important as like a censorship story. Then it's quickly started to become apparent that it was more than that. I do think that, this is an important investigation, and it's kind of a drag that it's not going to happen. But I also do think that there's clearly a political element to the fact that he was investigated in the first place, and you can almost morally justify doing it.
Matt, the laptop came out before, before the presidential race. I'm not sure that Trump brought it out. I don't remember exactly. It was handed over maybe to Giuliani first. I don't remember the chain of custody. Went to the FBI and so on. They declined to do anything about it. Then these intelligence agents were able to testify to its fraudulence. Trump was powerless to do anything. If Trump was such a overwhelming, omnipotent figure, he could have gotten somebody to come out, officially from the U.S. government and say it's real. He couldn't. That's how hamstrung he was by this operation, these people and this crowd.
In fact, the FBI did the opposite. They went and they helped kill the story. So
in fact, they attached the allegedly false laptop to the ongoing Russia scandal that they'd used against Trump, and tried to suggest, not very subtly, that this was another example of Trump's corruption.
Yeah, no, look, I'm not saying I like it. I just think that, if you're going to be all right, for instance, with the prospect of Trump pardoning himself or anybody else.
Matt, why are we imagining something that Trump's going to do? He already had that power.
No, I know. I'm just saying that he, that if you're okay with that, you have to be okay with this.
But how can anybody be okay in advance of something that hasn't happened?
Well, they've talked. I mean, they have talked a little about exercising pardon power. If they get reelected, haven't they? I mean, the Trump people.
Of people like the founder of Silk Road. I guess
Look, I'm not comparing situations.
Presidential powers are not limited in a lot of ways by the law in all kinds of cases. For example, it's perfectly legal for Joe Biden to put a nuclear bomb on a plane, fly it over Paris, and drop it. I mean, he might have NATO fighting back, but it's perfectly legal to do all kinds of things. It's perfectly legal for him to take the entire cartel responsible for importing fentanyl to the U.S., anybody who's been caught so far, and let them out of jail right now. El Chapo. Now, would that be fine? Presidents can do it.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, maybe I need to study a little bit on the intent of the pardon, of giving presidents pardon power. But I think part of it clearly is to act as a check against politicized prosecutions. And
how strange that Trump didn't immunize himself and then did get prosecuted,
right?
And that they bayed like hounds for it. And
I'm not comparing it. I'm just saying that I think it's an expected move that I can't get morally worked up about, because ultimately this is something voters approved, essentially. You know,
I can't get legally worked up about it because it's legal.
Right.
Morally, I can really get worked up about it because, as I say, it doesn't even specify a crime. He didn't even go. He didn't even go through the usual. There's kind of a presidential pardon process that involves a part of DOJ, and so he didn't do it. This was a napkin pardon. He wrote it on a napkin, just like he passed the party over to Kamala Harris. That was a napkin thing, and so on. And in the end, we don't have any power over our presidents except to get rid of them. There's impeachment that's possible and so on during it, but he saved all this, and he's saving the worst for last. And to see this party having made itself into the party of Salem judgment on witches, immorality, greed, and so on, and to have received their lectures while behind the scenes they were freaking pulling the safe out of the wall and throwing it in the back of their truck. I will not allow it, because I think that until these things become too reprehensible, nothing will change. Nothing's going to change in this country. Trump can name, Pontius Pilate as the prosecutor or the head of the FBI. They can go after everybody, but nothing will change when the powerful are absolutely immune. And this is an example of that. And like I say, Matt, the press is the reason the press exists is not to prosecute people for crimes. You know what I mean? We don't have prosecutorial power. We weigh in on things that may be illegal, but may just be wrong. The Vietnam War was legal.
Yeah.
But was it wrong? Yeah. And a lot of factors say that we knew it was, and we were bullshitting. We're in the job of catching people lying, catching people, sadly, in hypocrisy, catching people in crimes that are almost too big for the courts. And we don't exercise that power anymore, except in a phony way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just see this different. Like, I would probably feel a lot differently about this if Harris had won the election, for instance, because then you're talking about killing an investigation into a still, an administration that has 4 years ahead of it and all that. But I see the pardon process as kind of almost like an important civil liberty, like or a civil right that, for instance, in a third world country, they don't have this, and as a result, people cling to power because they are afraid that if they leave power, they're going to be prosecuted and jailed.
Matt, how do we know that doesn't happen here?
Well, no.
How do we have a president who has manifestly been incapable of performing his duties in all kinds of ways? Somebody's running the country. I mean, and somebody has been in his absence.
No,
are they
true.
Are they perhaps not people who held on to power because of fear of prosecution? Just because we have this presidential hood ornament out there doesn't mean the corrupt elements of our government are not shifting for themselves and holding tight to their prerogatives because they fear. I don't disagree with you. I'm not going to say, we need to re-examine presidential pardon power, though I think maybe you could make a case for it because this kind of blanket thing is a little novel. But I will say
that is very unusual. I have to admit, I was a little shocked by that.
They raise the temperature 5 degrees at a time until smoke's coming out of your skull, and each time they do it, they do it legally, or they do it in a way that can be covered through some sort of rationalization and can be defended by our weird press that's full of people who I wouldn't even talk to if they sat down next to me in a restaurant, but somehow I'm supposed to, sit with on my television. But finally you get to a point, and the point is that they elected Donald Trump against all the warnings, all the fathomless calumny from the press. They elected him, and this is why.
Right. Well, look, yeah, no, I get it.
And then the problem is he wants revenge. Dude, the dude just had 4 more trials than Joe Biden will ever have.
Look, all of those justifications and explanations are absurd, and those people should feel silly for doing it at this late stage of the game. Like, what do you have to gain? I just think that this is a thing that it's going to come up. It might come up in another context, and you've got to say, all right, well, it's okay, because this stops people from. I don't know. It's my personal opinion that this slows down intramural vengeance within the justice system a little bit. I don't love it, and I think this pardon is going to go down in history as one of the more noxious ones.
And it's not the first. Mark my words. It was it came out when it did because in 2 weeks, Hunter Biden was being sentenced. He's got all the way up to January 19th to bring in the whole crew. And one last thing. There was nothing that came out in the Twitter files that was technically illegal at the time, was there?
Oh, I know. Well, you need a judge to rule on it. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Like, I wasn't certain. Yeah.
But constitutionally, as it stands, because of the last Supreme Court ruling on the matter, the defense is they have freedom of speech as just as anyone else does. It doesn't fall under the First Amendment to throw doctors off and cancel people and create algorithms that shun various individuals. But just because at the moment it can be construed as legal or because it hasn't been ruled on. Now, this is different. The Constitution does seem to make no conditions around pardons.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, we're beating a dead horse at this point. I just think they imagined that the pardon would involve some pretty bad ones, right? In order, if you give a president absolute power, like this had to be part of the plan, right? So
my sort of civilian sense of why presidential pardons should exist was always this: they are to right wrongs that weren't righted otherwise. It's a court of last resort. It allows the principal, the ruler, to show mercy in a way that we also saw in the Bible. People were guilty, but in some way they'd paid, or they'd done it for reasons that were noble but not legal. It also allowed you to supersede archaic standards. In other words, all the people who dodged the Vietnam draft and were thought when they started doing it to be absolutely betraying their country by a morality that developed over the years, were actually protesting and avoiding an unjust war. And they were pardoned as a class, the Vietnam draft dodgers. And so the presidential pardon for me is something that allows your sense of culpability and criminality to evolve, recognizes the fact that there is injustice, and recognizes the other fact that sometimes people have paid in ways that are other than criminal sentences, but that it is literally a get out of jail free card for your family corruption.
I get it. I guess I kind of feel the same way I do about, like, people say things that are hate, like that really are hate speech, but are illegal, but we allow that as the price that we pay to have freedom of speech. And I'm going to be okay with it if Trump takes office and he pardons some people involved with J6, or if he were going to end up pardoning himself, I was going to be okay with that, because I think that's part of what's on the table when you vote for somebody, is you're giving them that power. So I don't know. I just look at this differently. Maybe it's probably not going to be a popular thing, but I'm not saying it to justify Biden's actions. It's the way I looked at the procedure. So, but anyway, this is boring. But there was another story where we're probably going to be more in agreement, which is the nomination of Trump's choice of Kash Patel to lead the FBI. And I guess maybe we should get to the question, probably the thing that people are freaking out most about right now, which is there's a viral video going around where Kash is talking to Steve Bannon. By the way, do you know Kash? Have you like talked to him before?
I texted with him once. I think he lives part-time in Las Vegas. I know people who know him, but I don't really
criminal prosecutions. Criminal prosecutions.
Sorry, go ahead. Yep.
Oh no, I don't really have any specific knowledge of him, So no, yep. He's new to me, except that I know about his career and I know about his doings and his role, in various investigations and so on.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I've run into Kash mainly through the Russiagate stuff, and recounted some of that in the site today. But so after he helped compose this thing called the Nunes memo, which was later kind of proven to be true by, he found flaws in the Russiagate investigation that he was heavily criticized for it. Then the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, comes in and it turns out to be right. Nobody admits it. And all that background is being lost in everybody's freakouts today. But they're also talking about this interview that he gave with Steve Bannon, where he says kind of an interesting thing.
Kash, I know you're probably going to be head of the CIA, but do you believe that you can deliver the goods on this in a pretty short order the first couple of months so we can get rolling on prosecutions?
Yes, we got the bench for it, Bannon, and you know those guys. I'm not going to go out there and say their names right now so the radical left-wing media can terrorize them. But, excuse me, the one thing we learned in the Trump administration the first go-around is we got to put in all America patriots top to bottom. And we got them for law enforcement. We got them for intel collection. We got them for offensive operations. We got them for DOD, CIA, everywhere. And the one thing we will do that they never will do is we will follow the facts and the law and go to courts of law and correct these justices and lawyers who have been prosecuting these cases based on politics and actually issuing them as lawfare. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice. And Steve, this is why they hate us. This is why we're tyrannical. This is why we're dictators, because we're actually going to use the Constitution to prosecute them for crimes they said we have always been guilty of, but never have.
So, yeah. So that's the thing everybody's, well, not everybody, as I just pointed out, as one of our listeners just pointed out, but a lot of people in media are freaking out about that line about going after people in the media. And what's your feeling about that? Because I normally reflexively defend the press and, frown on any kind of statement that comes off as a threat against the news media. Like, for instance, Trump talking about pulling the license of CBS after the 60 Minutes thing. But I have a slightly different feeling about this, and I'm curious what your thought is about that.
Okay. I lack context for specifically what actions by the media he's referring to.
Right. Okay.
Maybe
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole range of stuff that he could be talking about, and I don't know. I mean,
he could be talking about anything, but what is he talking about? Before I freak out, I have to know: is he talking about crimes, or is he talking about criminalizing attitudes or editorial opinions?
So there's a range of things that it could be, and I never talked to him about this, but I have talked to people who were kind of like around that investigation. And for instance, when there are a couple of narrow situations where journalists actually are potentially criminally liable for being involved in knowingly leaking like classified signals intelligence, right? And there were numerous instances of that throughout the Trump years. In fact, that was significantly how the Russiagate story stayed alive, especially in the first year, was through a lot of leaks that were clearly illegal on the leaker side, right?
Okay, Matt, let's try a hypothetical here
Mm-hmm.
that I think falls in the family of actions that you're alluding to. Say there's a illegal FISA warrant or a legal FISA warrant, but it's achieved, silently and it turns out fraudulently on me. Okay.
Right.
And say the deal is we're gonna surveil Walter Kern, and then have a New York Times reporter, and I'm gonna give him this stuff, and he's gonna put it out there, and then we're gonna use it to destroy him. Is that a crime?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I haven't talked to enough lawyers to know exactly what liability. I mean, a lot of this stuff is sort of uncharted waters for journalists. Like the classic thing that we're always taught is if your source steals something, if your source lies, if if the story's screwed up, but you just report it, you're not on the hook. Your source is, but you aren't. But there are lots of areas in this story where the lines get kind of blurry really quickly. Like for instance,
all I know before you get to that is that not for a jury to decide? Is that not for a prosecutor to decide?
Right.
I mean, he's not the head of the kick you out of school committee. He would be the head of the FBI. If he wants to make a case that journalists were involved in criminal conspiracies, and let's see it. I'll know what my downside is then. He's not talking about mounting extra legal prosecutions. He's talking about a set of maybe behaviors or actions that he knows more about than I do, and bring it on.
Yeah, and he also made in another interview he made the distinction, like, I'm not sure whether we're talking about criminally or civilly, but people who lied, we're coming for you. And certainly civilly, I mean, that's a tough question because usually with libel, there has to be a person who's concretely damaged. And, in the case of Carter Page, I think there are strong cases, and there are some journalists who might have had to worry at one point. But there's also a lot of stuff in the Russiagate story where there are just situations that are very unusual for journalists to be in these positions, right? Like they're helping pass on something like the Steele dossier to a politician. They're publishing it, shortly after an illegal leak, sort of willy-nilly, knowing that it might be untrue, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff.
What if it can be proved that they know it's untrue?
Well, it is proved that the FBI knew it was untrue, right? Like we know that for a fact because of the Horowitz report, that at least within like a week after the BuzzFeed publication of the Steele dossier, the FBI had a pretty good idea that the most salacious charges in there were unfounded. Like they interviewed the primary source there and stayed quiet about it, and their pals in media stayed quiet about it. Is that criminal? I don't think that would be criminal, but there are situations where a lot of the people who were involved in the Russiagate story, for instance, left the FBI and went on to become media figures where they reported on themselves and in a not so honest fashion. There's just a lot of stuff where this is kind of precedent-setting situations, and he says he's going to follow the law, and as you say, it'll be up to juries and judges to figure it out. I'm curious to see where he goes with it.
You would have to have accepted that the FBI is indeed the Stasi to be worried about them doing things that in public to public figures that are illegal. Do we really think Kash Patel is going to do that and get away with it? I don't. Journalism is another gray area. It's sort of like presidential behavior. If I told you, Matt, listen, I've got somebody I hate. Here's a story I want you to tell. It's a lie, but there's no way that they can prove it. That it's a lie. They don't have the power. They don't have the money. And you or some other journalist, I don't even want people to have to imagine you, goes out there and does it. And we both profit by it in some way because something we want to happen happens, and that person's destroyed. Was that a breach of ethics?
Ethics for sure. Yeah.
God, yes.
Yeah.
Because most of what journalists don't do comes under the heading of ethics. Well, I'm afraid we live in a time in which I do not attribute ethical behavior automatically to journalists. The Russiagate really was proof of that. We've got people who are still big on cable news who
there's still lead reporters, lead investigative reporters at the big dailies too.
Yeah. And so if Kash Patel wants to test that legal zone using judges, prosecutors, the law that stands on the books, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting. Again, I normally come down on the side of it's always a bad sign when law enforcement figures threaten the media, and I was very unhappy with Barack Obama for bringing out the Espionage Act to go after reporters a record number of times, right? Like I thought that was very ominous when he did that. I didn't like it when they went after Assange. But in this case, I'm curious.
But Assange, Matt, they did file charges against Assange.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And they weren't for lying.
No, I know.
They were for espionage.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It was...
And so we already have, he had to practically die in order to get free of this, to finally outweigh their prosecutions or their threat of prosecutions and so on.
He had to become a political liability to Joe Biden. Yeah. For them to let him go. Right.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable. And frankly, no, there hasn't been enough accountability, I don't think, within the business for people who were like fine with that because, for whatever partisan reason. But this one, look, the bigger picture here is the FBI is about to get a major colonoscopy, if not worse, if Kash Patel actually becomes the FBI director, because.
But the FBI already has interfered in the story that we were just talking about. A story that the New York Post wanted to publish. Mm-hmm. The FBI has been all over the press. That's what the Twitter files was about, basically. I mean,
I know.
Not persecuting reporters, just other people, and taking down the possibility of learning about certain stories and then punishing places that come out with the story. Oh, the FBI suddenly might get involved in journalism. What? They had whole teams.
Yeah, I know. They had still do. Right, yeah. Yeah, the foreign intelligence, what is it? The threat, I forget what the FITF stands for anyway, but yeah, they had a staff of at least 80 just sort of scanning social media and recommending that Aaron Mate be taken off the internet on behalf of the Ukrainian secret services.
And those proceedings did not involve lawyers. They did not involve judges. They were not public. They would never have even been discovered, but for a quirk of business when one guy takes over a company and opens his files to reporters. So I'm going to be all terrified that in the abstract or in some speculative way, Kash Patel says there may be journalists who've committed crimes.
Yeah, no, I'll worry about that when that day comes, and he says he's going to do it through the courts, and as long as that's the case, I'm fine with it, because that's what we have a court system for. But I think the bigger story is, the FBI has become this huge force in American life, and it's an unacknowledged, out of control counterweight to the entire White House and an executive branch. It is so massively outgrown its normal or mission, and I think it's even exceeded the worst days of the Hoover era. I was looking back today at some of the old COINTELPRO memos, right, where they were talking about how we have to avoid prioritize not letting a messiah rise from the black nationalist community, and making sure that Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, and Stokely Carmichael in particular don't assume become a unifying, electrifying presence. What do you notice about that list? 2 of them got killed. One of them lost his title.
Didn't Malcolm X's family just recently file some major lawsuit against the FBI? May be one of the targets of the lawsuit over the death of their
Maybe,
father.
Yeah,
No, I know they did. I'm just not sure who the complaint is against.
Nation of Islam, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, but the FBI too, I would imagine, right? And then Carmichael fled to Africa when he found out about this. So, but that was, and the problem in the Hoover era, and J. Edgar Hoover talked about this. In these memos, he talked about how our mission is to, disrupt, discredit, right? These people who we consider to be enemies of the state and threats. And this all came out in the church committee hearings, and all the ghastly, horrible stuff that they did to communists, civil rights leaders, anti-war activists, infiltrating these groups. It's
trade unions,
yeah.
Like you say, civil rights organizations, so on. They still see themselves as some kind of political enforcers because they came up with all these domestic extremism threats that they're all banging the drum about constantly, and white supremacy and all the other potential conspiracies against the United States. They in a sane country, in a real America that's anything like the one that was designed or anything like the one that we have in our hearts, we would be taking the FBI apart every 5 years and looking at every piece and reviewing every decision.
Yeah, what exactly are they doing? Why are they doing it? Do they have legal basis to do it?
But now what we've learned tonight and a million times over, they're impudent. They lie to Congress.
Right. They lie to Congress. They get away with it. They got away with the entire Russiagate thing. They lied to the whole country years on end about the biggest story in the world, and there were one lawyer, Kevin Kleinsmith, who was the guy who added a line in an email about Christopher Steele about Carter Page, that he was not a source for another agency when he was in fact a CIA source. That guy got convicted but got a suspended sentence. That's the entire so far punishment for the FBI, when the whole thing was a gigantic political dirty trick that involved things far more serious than Watergate, political spying, all kinds of crazy shit. So yeah, they need a comeuppance, but there's a whole history behind this, which I think is so fascinating.
Yeah, they blackmailed every president and anybody who could go after them. And we can read books and we chuckle over, we chuckle over the sort of mad power grabs of Hoover. We learned we've seen everything about it. The autopsy was done in the past which was a much smaller, much in some ways less powerful organization than it is now. We just didn't laugh it off. We're the few who would bring this point up. They're lying to the Senate. You know who the FBI exists at the behest of? The U.S. president. It's part of the executive branch.
Yeah, exactly.
It was formed by them. And it's like you raised a freaking, I had a ferret as a kid, and this ferret started growing and growing, and it got stinkier and meaner, and it would eat more garbage. And I thought, this ferret's going to freaking kill me, but it's my pet, right? Isn't the FBI our pet since we elect the president and the president is in charge of it? It is. But do we fear it? Yeah. Why should I fear my own ferret?
Right. Yeah. It makes no sense, but people just sort of absorb the idea that that's a normal thing in the last 8 years because of Trump, right? Because
remember the quaint scandals of the Clinton era, the FBI files that were found in the White House, and it was thought that maybe the Clintons had gathered these so that they would have the scoop on all kinds of people they wanted to, leverage and intimidate. That was a huge thing. America was shocked. Dude, the FBI files, they can push a button right now and get 10,000 times that much information, and they do.
Right. And they prioritize doing shit like that over, the things that they do that were actually good, like trying to intercept sex traffickers, child pornographers. I mean, the whistleblower that I interviewed, Steve Friend, was literally pulled off that gig to go sit outside the house of some guy who was rumored to be at J6. And he became a whistleblower after that. But you lived through we both lived through the church committee hearings. I was still a kid, so I don't really remember it. But everybody was so horrified by the idea that this out of control agency was going out there and planting false stories in the media to discredit the anti-war movement, to discredit Martin Luther King, to do all these things, try to mess.
They threatened his life. They didn't discredit him. They sent him a letter saying, kill yourself.
Well, that's true too, right? Yeah, I mean, these are the strategies to what they call disruption. And when they were chided a little bit, they backed off a little bit from doing that for 20 years or so. And then I remember interviewing this guy, Mike German, who used to be an undercover FBI agent, who talked about how in 2008, there suddenly started to appear these memos that from the counterintelligence division, basically saying, does the FBI have a strategy to disrupt any plans to commit acts of violence or other criminal conduct associated with the subject, when they were talking about a specific case? So they sort of reintroduced this Hoover-esque idea of disrupt. We're not going to bring a case necessarily, but let's just do something that is a little bit below the level of going to court, and
let's scare the shit out of them.
Right. Let's scare them.
Let's go knock on their door. Let's send Martin Luther King a letter saying, we know all about you. We're going to ruin you. Kill yourself and do the honorable thing. Matt, the funny thing about the FBI, so I live part-time in Vegas, and there's a thing called the Mob Museum there, which I think everybody should visit if they haven't, if they're in Las Vegas. The funny thing about the FBI is it really didn't do anything for a long time. One of the signal accomplishments of J. Edgar Hoover was to pretend that there wasn't a mafia for decades after everybody knew there was. Finally, an FBI agent, kind of acting on his own, went to a mob of mobs, Godfather of Godfathers meeting.
Oh, the Appalachian thing.
Yeah. Well, I think it was in upstate New York. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Appalachian New York. Yeah.
And they're finally like, we're not going to be able to pretend this mob thing doesn't exist anymore. Okay. Literally, the FBI's main job was to ignore organized crime for a long time. Then they couldn't do it anymore. Then they made this big, public relations push, and they started doing it. But the mob was still operating in New York City until Giuliani pretty much cleaned them out. My point is this: their record of accomplishment in America is meager. It's meager.
I know. Even with things that they're celebrated for, like catching serial killers.
When I was a kid, we had a show on TV, the FBI. It was called The FBI. It was meant to drill into Walter's mushy little 9-year-old patriotic brain that there was nothing really higher than the flag except the FBI. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., the son of, I don't know, God, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who must his dad have been if he's willing to go about as junior, does this show. Everyone is some case from the files of the FBI. I mean, did they ever lose? No, they won every time. Were they ever wrong? No. Were everybody they went up against a scumbag? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The worst show we could ever had on TV. Did East Germany have a show called Stasi?
I know.
Justice Files.
And now there's like 50 spin-offs of those shows on Netflix.
They made themselves untouchable through modern public relations. And dude, they nearly lost it all when America opened the files and found out what they'd actually been doing.
I know. But they had successfully kind of remarketed themselves through, thanks to movies like Silence of the Lambs and stuff like that. John Douglas, The Mine Hunter, which, by the way, if you read those books, it's hilarious because he gives all these examples. This is the famous criminal profiler, the father of the profiling program. He lists every successful profile that the FBI ever did, but you don't hear about the ones that didn't hit, right? How many profiles did the FBI do that weren't even in the ballpark of right? That would be a fun thing to find out someday.
Dude, they couldn't catch the Unabomber until his brother turned him in.
Right. And they nearly overruled the agent who wanted to pursue that strategy.
They didn't stop 9/11.
They didn't stop 9/11. And remember, there were whistleblowers like Colleen Rowley who came forward saying that, look, we had information from the Minnesota field office that you just didn't act on. She sent a letter to Robert Mueller, of all people, in 2002, complaining about the failures of the FBI to act on this information. But what did they do after 9/11? They complained that, the problem was we didn't have enough authority to conduct investigations. We needed the Patriot Act. We needed to go through grand jury material. We need all kinds of stuff that we didn't have before. And they just started getting powers that they didn't have before, like, sending national security letters to companies where, now they can access your personal material, and the company that hands it over to the FBI is under a gag order and can't tell you about it. And they send out tens of thousands of those a year, or at least they did for, when a couple of Inspector General reports looked at those things. But they have some limitless ability to investigate. And because they've moved into this realm of collecting intelligence rather than making cases, that's what they do now. They spy on us, they intimidate, they disrupt, and they even disrupted the president. They looked at him as like another one of those sort of negative criminal figures that they just didn't like. And
we are prisoners, or at least captives. Mental captives, certainly emotional captives of our own overgrown ferret, which can do anything, and which we got as a pet. I once had a situation with a family member where I had to call a really leading private detective from California, one of the best and most powerful in the country, from one of these agencies that's practically an international police force. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to consult with him about something that was happening to someone I knew, something illegal that was happening. And, I called the FBI. I said, do not ever call the FBI, especially for a favor or to report someone. Don't ever do it. And I said, why? He says, because you don't want to have any reason to talk to them. Because the minute you talk to them, you're talking to the FBI. Right. And the minute you're talking to the FBI, you're under various laws that allow you, if you said something or covered something up or talk to them again and say something different, to be prosecuted. Don't call them for any reason. It's like, don't call the fire department. Let your house burn down.
Right.
This was a veteran of law enforcement. At a certain point, you got to let the wisdom and the common knowledge, just like somebody had to tell Edgar Hoover, you can't hide that the mob exists anymore. I don't think we can hide that the FBI is an institution that deserves deep examination.
Yeah, and I think they just need to be it's not salvageable at this point.
If they told you yesterday, if they told you today that Kash Patel has basically gotten into office and has decided to dismantle it, and Vivek Ramaswamy says it can be shrunk to an office of 5 people, would you go, but we're not safe?
No, I absolutely would not. I'm not sure. Look, I'm sure they do some things well. I don't know. It's like the SEC. They do a pretty good job with apparently insider trading, right? Like that's a crime they can catch because it's not that hard to see, bank robberies, I guess the FBI solves those, but
the question of the ages is who will watch the watchers. So we have at least every right to watch them, to see into their files. We even should probably be making movies like Supercut about the whistleblower in a corrupt New York City police precinct, so that we can see what is their leeway to be corrupt. I don't want to see their self-congratulatory stories. I want to see a few worst case scenarios to keep them honest. What is it about institutions that expect the press and the public to be constantly polishing their apple? No, we should be looking at their warts, because they have too much power and are too unsupervised and literally too interested in their own preservation to be given an infinite leash.
And they've started to just appear on television in place of reporters and newsreaders. And we were just looking at Andrew Weissman, who's a figure regularly on MSNBC. There's a gazillion of those people.
How about a fellow named Peter Strzok?
Right. Yeah. Strzok, McCabe, right? Like they're all on there. And if you read the Horowitz report, how Strzok can still have how any of them can still have careers in public after the shit that came out in those reports is beyond me.
I have a feeling that what Patel is alluding to is something, and I'm not making any specific accusations, or something like a Peter Strzok-like figure getting in with journalists and making a pact or having an arrangement to share information in a way that either came from illicit sources, was meant to do things that influenced or destroyed other people, and that there was a knowing complicity in these relationships. I imagine that that's the kind of thing he's talking about.
Yeah, well, look, there are a dozen suspiciously timed leaks that you can talk about. The Flynn leak, right? The one where he was caught talking to Sergei Kislyak, that came out in the Washington Post.
But what was Flynn prosecuted for? Do you remember?
Well, lying to the FBI, allegedly,
exactly.
Right? With that ridiculous situation where somehow the FBI doesn't record an interview, like it's handwritten notes, and then they have the thing, the handwritten thing in the note, like, sorry, are we trying to arrest this guy or get him fired or what? Like, that's in there, and that doesn't kill the case. But even beyond that, Walter, like in the last 6 or 7 months, I've started to get like emails from people saying things like, I work for an organization that on both the left and the right, they do some kind of political advocacy, and they get knocks on the door from the FBI, just sort of asking them what's up, and I don't think that's an uncommon story anymore. We've seen a number of these things on on social media, but some of these things have turned into cases. Remember, there was that African Socialist Party that just got it rung up on all those crazy technicalities in Florida, and the monitoring of the so-called domestic violent extremists, people who are put on essentially like no-fly lists. I mean, this stuff has gotten out of control. Most of it doesn't have to do with bringing cases, which is what bothers me. I think that whole mission of theirs, that off-the-books mission, it's got to go. I mean, am I wrong? I'm curious to know what people in the audience think about this.
They're a domestic intelligence service at this point, besides the law enforcement service. They pair up with our CIA and other intelligence services devoted to the collection of foreign intelligence, and they run the domestic side of those investigations. Let's put it this way. We had, after years and years of corruption, finally this church committee in the mid-70s. Was it a bad thing or a good thing? Did it result in, a little bit of correction?
I think so, yeah.
I think so too. Well, we're in a similar mood as a country, and I think at a similar point, and we've got a lot of unexplained stories. And the thing that's always said of citizens, if you've done nothing wrong, then why are you afraid?
Right.
Well, does that not apply to institutions too? If they've done nothing wrong, then why should they be all outraged?
All the more so for institutions, especially for people who were, just doing what they were told. Like, why should they care? But look, I think there are a lot of programs that we're going to find out about. Before the church committee hearings, remember, this was during the time when Cy Hirsch was doing his Family Jewels story about the CIA instituting these domestic surveillance programs, which are very similar to things we found out about. We began to find out about with Snowden, and have since continued on and been combined with the censorship mission. We need to find out about all this stuff, but I feel like the FBI is the big test, right? Like if that horse isn't broken early in the Trump presidency, I think we're going to know how effective Trump is going to, or whether his promises are going to turn out to be real.
There are already former FBI officials who are proven hostile to him, who are at some point involved in this real operation to get rid of him, whether they had a criminal involvement or not, who are on TV now basically telling him what he should do or warning him not to do other things.
Oh, yeah. John Bolton even was weighing in on this, right?
So I said earlier, I spent part of my time in Las Vegas, and the FBI, whatever it may have done or not have done, has very little respect in the city of Las Vegas due to their investigation of the largest mass shooting in American history. You find one cab driver in that city, one person sitting at a bar who has lived there, who tells you that they cracked the case with the FBI. It was Stephen Paddock, and he was shooting strangers because he was pissed about being behind on his video poker account. Okay, well, when you lose confidence, it doesn't matter whether you lost it justly or not. You've lost it.
Right.
And to regain it, you must again prove yourself. We have to do that all the time. Governments in parliamentary system are always getting a vote of no confidence. It's not whether it's justified or not, it's whether it doesn't exist. And in a lot of places and in a lot of realms, there's no confidence. So if they want to operate, even if you believe in the FBI, that has to be restored. And by what means? Them telling everybody what to do?
Right. Yeah. We self-examine. We're fine. Yeah. I don't think that's not going to work. I mean, heads have to roll on this thing. I was really struck by, Michael Horowitz, the IG, I went back and looked at his testimony about the whole Russiagate thing, and he was an Obama appointee. He's not a Republican or anything like that. And he was saying, yeah, look, there's got to be a culture change. When the senators from Louisiana said people have to be fired, he's like, yeah, I agree with that. I think everybody outside of the agency knows what the deal is, but it's just got to happen, right? And then, when I see stuff like this is John Bolton calling for a rejection of Kash. That just tells me that it was the right nomination.
Let's remind our audience who Kash Patel is. Kash Patel is a prosecutor who spent a long time in the Department of Justice. He was a investigator for the House committee that was led by I forget his name around the Russiagate and the surveillance of Trump. He's spent his whole career in law enforcement. He's not a minor league baseball player. He's a lawyer, prosecutor, and a lifelong adjunct to our or member of our legal system.
Yeah, he was a terrorism prosecutor, and during the peak of the lunacy, remember Mueller mania, when there were the vote of candles, the Mueller time T-shirts. I was looking today, people were selling cups that had R2D2 on it that said, "Help me, Robert Mueller, you're my only hope." It was like every conceivable piece of merchandise. We're cheering for that investigation, but Kash was doing the other investigation into the origins of the Russiagate scandal. And, he was the most hated person on earth, and he turned out to be right about that. He was working out of Devin Nunes' office in the House Intelligence Committee. And, he was proven right in that affair. And people have forgotten that because the entire media skated on years of reports saying otherwise. So I think it's an important appointment, just in the sense that it's going to be a daily reminder to everybody that it wasn't him that fucked up on this on that thing. It was everybody else, and maybe it will help remind people of what actually happened. I don't know. Walter, do you
remember a certain detail of the Hunter Biden scandals? One is that a former FBI director, I can't remember his name, he's paid $100,000 to the family.
I don't remember that one. Is that...
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the guy. I'm absolutely sure of my facts. And I'm going to say this. Once somebody becomes an FBI director, they seem to get a solemn, almost worshipful response ever after. It's a testimony to the power they have. In other words, James Comey,
oh my God, that guy.
The man who wrote the book, A Higher Calling, or whatever it was. Chris Wray, whoever he is. The guy came out of nowhere as far as I'm concerned. He's one of the most faceless, emerging from the backdrop.
But he's completely covered in the Russiagate ick. He's got to go, that guy,
But exactly. But see, here's what I don't like about what's going on now in general. And I've sort of thrown caution to the winds, because I think we're in a very unique period where we have a chance to talk honestly and think in a new way, and maybe make mistakes, but at least new mistakes, not the old ones. Have I ever seen an election go on into, the election's over, but now there's almost an election around every single cabinet pick?
Right.
Do you remember the Comey appointment? Do you remember the Wray appointment? Do you remember any foofara of this level about every single cabinet member, as though there's a whole second stage to being elected president, where you can't form a government without the approval and permission?
Yeah, I thought I mean it started to become a thing that we did this with Supreme Court nominees, and I guess that goes back a long way. But I don't.
They're
remember
lifelong appointments. Some of these are going to last 4 years.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. This is a new thing, and there are people making arguments now that Trump must allow Chris Wray to serve out his entire 10-year term. Fuck you! Like, I mean, the guy's the head of the executive branch, and he's got to put up with an FBI director who helped put out fake stories to try to sink his political career. Come on.
He absolutely doesn't, Matt.
No, I know he doesn't.
And my big fear for the country is this. People voted, okay? They voted against a tide that I have never seen of invective, of alarmism, of assassination attempts, and so on. They now, if they are frustrated in their ability to see the will of their elected president enacted legally, are going to fall into a kind of despair and a dropout depression about the possibility of democracy that makes the warnings that we were given about Trump look like nothing. You must allow not just a free election, but you must allow the powers that are the result of that election to be exercised, or it wouldn't have mattered who won. And that goes for both sides, it absolutely does. So this like referendum on every little cabinet. Hell, 10 years ago, we didn't even know who the DNI, who the director of national intelligence was. Right. We didn't even know their name. Now Tulsi Gabbard gets the proctological examination for a job we didn't even used to know exist.
Well, part of the reason we didn't know it existed is because the intelligence community has grown at this exponential rate since 9/11. And, used to be, we knew about the CIA, we knew the FBI had a counterintelligence division, we knew the NSA existed. But, there's a gigantic, there's the DIA, there's 17, 18 different agencies. And it's a huge thing. It's gotten out of control. And without really knowing the specifics, I think Americans, in electing Trump, the whole thing about the deep state is based on a legitimate sense that this shit has just gotten out of control. It's got to stop. We got to, we got to get rid of a huge portion of this. And I'm looking forward to it. As you say, at least it's not the same problem, right?
Yeah, what's the problem going to be? Damage to the reputation of institutions that clearly half of America doesn't trust anyway? That somebody might be injured by the Epstein list, or them admitting they have things like a Hunter Biden laptop instead of covering it up. What's the damage going to be? All this protection of our institutions has been
sources and methods.
Listen, they have fallen below the moral, intellectual, and behavioral standards of the average truck driver. When our institutions are worse than the average person, and in fact are able to get away with things that the average person wouldn't even contemplate, we've got a major problem. Whether it's a legal problem, a moral problem, a philosophical or social problem, doesn't matter. And there's no way that America would elect a guy who's been compared to everything from Satan to, Daddy Warbucks to Hitler, unless they thought something was wrong that needed strong medicine. And to stop medicine from even being administered or from starting to be administered, because you and I both know that every reform this guy tries to make will face battalions of lawyers, 100 deep, who've been waiting for this. And so the ability of Trump to overreach is one of the most unfounded paranoias I've ever seen in my life, because he was barely able to get elected. He was barely able to stay alive. He was barely able to defend himself. And the thought is that I want to see the battle. Because I want both sides to come out onto the battlefield. I want to see what they're all about. I want to see what the issues are. We can't go on with a story an American story that we don't know and half of us don't believe.
Yeah, I can't wait for them to just start pouring out files about shit like Russiagate, for instance. And, we have eight years of moral panic that needs to be kind of exploded somehow. That's the only way it's going to happen, I think. So the Church Committee hearing was good for that.
One single company, Twitter, opening its files to a few reporters, told us more about how things actually work in America in terms of the flow of information and the policing of the internet than everything else combined. Imagine if there was an FBI files. Just
oh my
imagine.
God. Can you? It would be. Yeah, I mean, just the possibility that could happen is so beautiful. That's a beautiful thought. Let's end on that, because that is a happy thought, and it's very possible, I think, that something like that could happen. So, there's going to be a lot of Sturm and Drang about Kash and whether or not he's capable of running a big organization like this.
The biggest lie in America is that running big organizations is hard.
Right.
Because at the head of every big organization is a golfer. And underneath him is a guy who will die working 29 hours a day. Big organizations are easy to run. It's 7-person organizations that are hard to run. I remember when the Monica Lewinsky story broke, and we had the Star Report, and in some ways the Star Report was a blow-by-blow description of days in the White House where, Monica Lewinsky happened to visit. And dude, it was like the president woke at 8. He went to his desk. He watched TV for a few hours. He ordered a pizza. Monica Lewinsky came over. She left. He called some people, watched some more TV, and went to bed. And I was like, wait a second. This whole notion that somebody's in there, marshaling forces while everybody runs in with, telegrams and, the Russian ambassadors on the line. Clinton was like a guy sitting out in his ski lodge all by himself going, hey, that kind of Zoftig girl, can you get her over here, man? I'm bored.
And he was a young, healthy, relatively sentient person.
Dude, remember the final days about Nixon? Oh my God, they're just sitting around drinking and jabbering all the time, and get Henry in here. I want to talk about Howard Hughes.
Right, Stevie. What's that drink when you drop a shot into a Boilermaker?
Right.
Boilermakers and cardigans and babbling into the tape recorder. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Running a huge organization is probably easier than running a small one.
Dude, apparently Elon Musk runs some of the biggest companies in the world, and yet I could probably account for 14 hours of every day just from between when he's tweeting and seeing him at Mar-a-Lago and everything, and he's supposedly, he probably is a genius in many ways. He's not having any problem. He's going to frickin' Mars, and he's sitting at UFC fights watching, memes on his phone, running Kash Patel. How could he ever run the FBI?
Yeah, I think he'll figure it out. And I think he's of a mind to let the public know some things, because he's taken a lot of heat for saying things that people didn't believe. So he's gonna find if there are papers there, I think I've got to put the Church Committee to shame. I think
here would be my deal, having heard some of his controversial statements. We'll revisit it in 1 year. We'll give you a hard going over in a year, but surprise us. Let's see what you can do, because I'm not so sure we're satisfied with what the past crew has done.
Yeah, I think it would take a lot for me to feel sorry for the current iteration for the FBI. So, anyway, in hopes that we will soon be getting a flowering of FBI files. I think that it ranks as good news right now. So anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in tonight. We had a nice crowd coming back from the holidays, and thanks, Walter. Sorry for running a little late, and
dude, I could sit here all night. Obviously, I mean, I'm completely unaware, but I will say that not having Rachel left a little hole in my consciousness.
Should we do it one more time? I guess we should check in on her.
Matt, you know how they put a mole on a beautiful woman's face to sort of bring out her beauty? Rachel Maddow is the mole on our live stream. You know, everyone hates it. Everybody begs us. The comments go sour. People threaten to, run away. But by comparison, it makes us look great. And today we just have ourselves to compare ourselves
That's
to.
true. That's true. Yeah. I think it grounds the show a little bit. So let's see how it works. We'll go back to it next week and see how sincere those angry comments. Oh, look at this. We're already getting this. Just say no to Rachel. Someone's saying.
But I just have this feeling we're going to miss a network moment. Where like MSNBC goes, we got to get rid of her. We can't break the contract. She's got the most powerful friends in Washington. But these Trenda Agua guys apparently will kill anybody for $10,000, and it's a sanctuary city. So we'll just send it in and have her killed on air.
Oh God.
I know it's horrible, but I didn't write it. Patty Chayefsky did, so you can't hold me.
Oh, did he? Okay. Well, there we go. That's right.
Remember the end of Network where they hire the mousy tongue hour people?
The mousy tongue hour. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot about that. Totally. Yeah. That would be beautiful. That's from another movie. That's from All the President's Men. If you could get John Mitchell, that would be beautiful. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks, Walter, and we will see you later in the week.
We'll see you this week. Yeah.
Take care.